we do work well together, and we rewrite each other's sentences. We revise endlessly. I have very few books on my computer that have fewer than 20 revisions, and some a good deal more than that. And at the end of a book, when a book is published, I sometimes don't know who wrote what sentence. And even if I do, we never say.
As people always are interested in how we collaborate, and since we've written, 11 books together?
Maybe.
Over the years, on various subjects, but all having to do with the arts, and mostly visual artists. Each book is a different kind of adventure. Each book is a different challenge. And as we grew together in terms of our book making, we took different roles. Each book, well, what I mean by that is sometimes Sandra was interested in a social or historical perspective, and I became interested in an aesthetic perspective, and then we would trade around, and in the end it was storytelling, because whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, we're storytellers.
Revision is an important part of our and revision is everything. I think I said earlier in our conversation that I can't think of a manuscript on my computer, and you have those, every book has its own little house, and 20, 30 more files, back and forth, back and forth. We used to have to FedEx, now we email, but you have to revise, and then you have to trust who you're going to show your first pieces to, but it's not like getting a grade in school where it's not the end of the conversation, you get a B. It's the beginning of a conversation. And I love revising. Getting the first draft down on paper is so hard. It's just so hard. But after that, revision is fun. Revision.
Both of us like revision.
Yes.
Thank goodness. And then it goes to your editor, and Neil Porter, our editor on a number of books, he comes back with marks. And then, of course, there's the copy editor. And so a book goes through a lot of different people and a lot of different processes before it becomes the book that we hope gets out into the world in as good a shape as possible. You can't say perfect because nothing is ever perfect, but we get as close as we can given the parameters
in that time and place.
Exactly. Yeah. But the business of revision, for me, I learned everything I know about revision from Sandra, because she was my editor for my first 2 novels, and she had a specific way and a very kind way that she would underline and put a question mark or say, you need something funny here, or can you reword this in a different way, a bit awkward. And can I tell the story? Once she sent me something to look at, and I underlined something, and I said, "This is the worst sentence I've ever read." And she came back and said, "This is not how we revise."
What I said is, you always claim you learned everything you know about editing from me. I never said that.
Never did.
Although I often thought that, but I never said that. That's the kind of thing that closes you down.
That's true.
And it really isn't good for your creative process. Although at the time I think I laughed and agreed with her, because sometimes you do write the worst sentence you ever read. It's just amazing. You have to have your messes before you can go forward.
I have given a number of writing workshops around the country to young writers and some older writers, and one of the things I quote is my friend Sandy Asher, who says you have to write 1,000,000 lousy words. You have to put in your time. You have to write and revise. And I think reading is another part of it. I was always a reader. I'm not sure every writer was always a reader, but for me, the business of language and turning words around and words into sentences and then into paragraphs and then into stories with a beginning, middle, and an end, that for me as a child growing up was a preoccupation.
I often find that I don't know what I think until I write it. No, I think I know what I think, but then I write it and whole different things come out. And then there's the part where Jan and I read each other's things and we start talking about it and why does this work or why doesn't that work or where is this going? And then we both find out what we really, really think, because that's part of the process. Is our understanding of the material grows as we work.
Well, there are two things that happen. One, when we can't seem to agree on a revision, it's either cut, just cut it. We always laugh and say, cutting is good, just cut it. Or one of us gives in to it.
Well, generally speaking, if one of us doesn't like something and doesn't like it strongly, not just doesn't like it, but doesn't like it strongly, we may not know what the answer is then, but we know we have to look at it, even if
Go
it's,
back to it.
Yes, even if it's a sentence I'm in love with, or even if it's something she's in love with, we're going to have to look at that again, because if somebody's not liking it that strongly.
And Colette said, "Murder your darlings."
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. And we have Armageddon about once a book.
And Flaubert said, "You can't be married to your words."